Being Black in America comes with its challenges. However, we understand that enlightenment through education is the oppressor's worst fear. By bridging the gap between academia and the people, our purpose is to equip you with knowledge that breaks down barriers during your journey towards truth and freedom. Welcome to the Black and Highly Dangerous Podcast.
Yo, Daph, what's good? What's good? How your week been?
You know, it's been pretty good. Getting down to the wire. I just have a couple more days before it's time to submit this dissertation. So, you know, it's stressful, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You see the light.
Yes. Trying to be doctor like you. So we can have two PhDs on
BHD.
Yes. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. That's what's up. The grind continues. Yeah, you know, I kind of was just hanging with family this week. My mom's birthday, hanging with her.
Oh, happy birthday.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, happy birthday, Mom. So that was cool and hanging on my brother and all that kind of stuff and just kind of, you know, taking it easy a little bit. Nothing too much. You know, like I said, February is going to be back to the grind for me. All my colleagues, they started back up. You know, the semester started this past week. So saw all their tweets and posts of them adjusting, getting the rust off and taking long naps over the weekend. Because that first week is a little draining sometimes. Like you kind of been relaxing and now you got to get back in, you know, teacher mode and traveling and office hours and students asking all kind of questions and advising. It's like, it kind of just hits you like a Mack truck. You can't really ease into it. Not with them students, man, with all them questions when their first week back. So shout out to them. Y'all hang in there, stay strong, and I'll see y'all in the fall.
That's so funny. But yeah, I think it's kind of nice that you've been able to take a little time, you know, and now you can ease back into things and really focus on. So, you know, for people who do not know, when it comes to academia, you know, there's a balance between publishing and teaching. But as far as I know, I mean, I haven't lived that life, but from what I've heard, you know, once the teaching is going, it's really hard to get the publishing in, get the writing in, get the other things you want to do in. So I'm really happy that you have this time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy too. And I think I feel like that itch, you know, because I kind of been like kind of chilling and now I'm like, okay, I need to get some work, you know, so I'm like energized again, like, all right, let's get busy. Because when you get tired, you gotta be like dragging your feet and like, all right, let me do it. But now I'm like, all right, you know, I'm more ready to get popping now.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
But all right, so you know, I feel like we got a lot to talk about today. I feel like a lot of stuff is happening this past week that I want to get to, but naturally, I guess we could start with some old Lord news and then get into some of the deeper content later on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we go. Hello, and welcome to BHD News, where we give you the most current and eye-opening old Lord news of the week. Join us as we present news that'll make you want to say,
Okay, so for this first story, Ty, do you remember visiting Ball State a few years ago when we were in grad school? Okay. Well, it is an Indiana university, kind of in a small town, similar to Purdue. Well, they made headlines this week because a Ball State student, a Black student, had the police called on him by a professor because he would not change seats in the middle of class.
Wait, what? Wait. So the professor called the police because he wouldn't change seats?
Yes. So I think the full story is the student was in a particular seat, I think charging his laptop. And the professor, I guess, asked him to switch seats. And the student refused to. So the professor called the cops on him.
So what happened after that?
The police removed him from class.
Oh, I can't believe, really? Oh, that's extreme, man. Yeah, that's
And
weird.
actually, it was a she. It was a she.
Oh, she? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's extreme. Yeah, yeah. I don't. That's sad. I mean, I don't get it. I'm trying to think what I would. I haven't had that
Oh, it
issue
was
yet,
a
and
he.
sometimes I
It was a
think
he.
about that. What would I never had an issue like that, but I try to think about like if I had a student that I don't know was being problematic or not really listening, and kind of what measures should I take or can I take. But I definitely wouldn't be calling the police on somebody that didn't change their seat.
Yeah.
Though. I mean, that's extreme. But yeah, I don't know if there's like a protocol of what we should and shouldn't do. Maybe I got to look into some handbook or something, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
So the exact issue was that the student walked into class, his usual seat was taken. The professor told him to sit in the back of the class, which he did. A student midway through the lecture left class. The professor lectured on for about 5 more minutes and then all of a sudden told the student to switch seats again. So it just seems silly. Like, why are you doing all this? I don't know. At that point, I'm not going to stop my lecture because one student left class and now I want you to switch seats again after I had already directed you to sit in the back of the classroom.
Yeah, nah, it's too much. It's too much. Well, yeah, that's definitely a little newsworthy for sure.
Yes, honey. Okay, so this other story. So a family sues TSA after a 79-year-old man's $82,000 in life savings were seized at an airport, but he wasn't charged with the crime. So what happened was the DEA and TSA thought it was suspicious. I found this on the web.
That serial
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about?
Business.
What are you talking about, Siri? So they were going through. So what happened was this older guy asked his daughter, like he had like $82,000 in a Tupperware container. And he asked his daughter because she put it in a checking account for him. Well, the daughter, I guess, didn't live in the same city as him. So when she was going to do that, when she traveled back home to Boston, she said she looked up on the website, there was nothing against flying with large sums of money. And so she took it, but the DEA found it suspicious. They also called the 79-year-old man and they say his story didn't add up, but the daughter is like, he's mentally declining. But they're fighting to try to get the money back.
Yeah, I bet they will be trying to get that money. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but what's crazy is from this article, there's actually going to be a class action lawsuit because the DEA has seized more than $209 million from about 5,000 travelers at about 15 airports. Yeah.
Oh
and in a report by the Justice Department, it says the DEA has seized, like just beyond airports, has seized about $4 billion in cash from individuals, but only $3.2 billion of those seizures have resulted in criminal charges. So I feel like if it hasn't resulted in criminal charges, if you can't prove it, you need to give these people their money back.
$4 billion?
$4 billion.
Yeah. And so two only been resulted in criminal charges. I mean, they just sitting there with $2 billion.
Well, no, 3.2 has. So, but it's still close to $1 billion that hasn't resulted in. And I've read stories like this before, like when, strippers, maybe they're coming from the club with a lot of cash. If they get pulled over, like cops seizing it, even though like the money has glitter and stuff on it. There was actually recently a case where a stripper, she did win her money back because it was like the cops couldn't prove that like it was there was like criminal activity related to the cash. So, child, but be careful out here. Anything over like $10,000, you're probably going to get stopped, even if it doesn't say something like on the airport website.
Yeah, that's I think with policing, I think when the laws changed, they started doing things like civil forfeiture, and I think that's just a kind of a loophole police did where they didn't actually have to convict the person, but they were able to seize assets that they felt were linked to criminal activity. And I think with that loophole, a lot of law enforcement kind of been getting away with it. So it's good to see that there's going to be a significant amount of pushback because, yeah, y'all sitting there on $1 billion and taking people's money, that ain't right.
Yeah, that is,
That just ain't right.
it's so crazy to me because it could happen to anybody. Have too many cars, have too many whatever. And, if they think you did something wrong, they could take your stuff.
No, yeah, that ain't right. That ain't right.
Okay. So for this next story, I don't know if it's old or news, but it's just interesting that this year, nearly 2,000 stores or retailers will be closing their doors.
Mm,
Yep. It includes stores like 450 Pier 1 stores, 230 Gap stores. This one surprised
mm.
me. 200 Walgreens. I'm really surprised by that because
Man,
Walgreens,
that's a big
everybody
one.
be in Walgreens.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. AC Moore, Ace Hardware. Some of the other stores I wasn't surprised. 178 Forever 21 stores. But when you got Walgreens closing stores, that says something.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of stores like Walgreens are, you still need those kind of stores where you got to stop and, you want something quick or
Mm-hmm.
especially, I mean, pharmacies or whatever they have. But it's interesting because, you're not buying like a bag of chips off of Amazon or whatever. I mean, I'm sure some people are,
Yeah.
but for the most part, things like that, those small kind of like convenience items, a lot of those stores should be doing well. But it's interesting to hear that they're closing their
Yeah, that's what I'm
shops.
trying to.
And that's a lot of people losing jobs
Hmm.
too.
I'm trying to figure out who would a Walgreens be competing with because one, a lot of CVS, like a lot of pharmacies in the past have closed, and Walgreens was the one that kind of stayed strong in terms of like keeping their hold on the market in terms of pharmacy. So I'm like, who is rising? Is it CVS? Like, I don't know.
I have no idea. Yeah, CVS still seems to be holding in there strong, and I think can't remember, but I think CVS did something with their. I think they signed some kind of deal or merge or something with some kind of healthcare
Mm,
insurance or
I think it
something.
might be United
That
Health.
I think so. I think with United Health, there's like CVS Care, and I think that was a big kind of merger or deal or contract, and maybe that played a role.
Mm,
Who knows? I don't know. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep our eyes on for sure.
yeah. Okay, this other one is child. If you are traveling, if you are out in this world, be careful because now we have a coronavirus that is spreading across the globe. And worldwide, more teen 50 people are dead, all in China, but there have been
Mm,
40 confirmed cases. Um, that have been identified in 13 places outside of China, and a few of them have been in the United States.
I think it was like Washington State, if I remember.
I think there's
Was one of
two or
them.
three in California now.
Mm-hmm.
One person in Illinois.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I was like, it makes sense for it to be on the West Coast because their proximity to Asia and Asian countries. So China, in particular, that makes sense. But I was looking it up, and again with these kind of health scares, I think they they just people it gets overhyped a little
uh,
bit because I think one of the most worrisome things is that with things like this, if the mutation kind of changes fast or whatever, then it can be hard for them to come up with a cure. But for the most part, people who are most vulnerable are people who are always most vulnerable. They're really young and they're really old. Um, Seem to be the most susceptible to these things. And of course, if you don't have access to a lot of healthcare services, because I think where it originated in China was a very rural
okay,
community, and I think it's a disease from, like the animals
yeah,
have, and so it must have been something that they were eating, being rural, agricultural based, something with one of the animals, and then a human caught it, and then wind up catching it. So I know they're still trying to figure out a lot about it, but it doesn't seem to be as alarming as what the headlines are saying in a lot of
okay,
ways. We've seen this before with swine flu
yeah,
and all those other things.
SARS.
Yeah, maybe having us freaking out, and then after like a month, we don't hear about it ever again.
So I actually did read, and this was wild, that it might be linked to bats.
Mm,
And I don't know. I saw this picture. Um, yeah, of people eating bats.
See, that's wild. I mean, and bats do carry a lot of diseases.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't surprise me if you are indulging in that, but I couldn't see myself eating a
Oh
bat.
hell no! You got to see the picture. You have to see the picture because it's like bat soup, and like is this really bad
Oh.
black? I said black bats, and it. Oh my goodness! I don't even know how anybody could even think about eating that. But I mean, people eat different things. I ain't gonna even judge, so let me not. Because I know the things my mama eat as a Southern woman. I'd be like, well, child, what are you eating? But she ain't no bad
Yeah.
though. Um,
That is true. Some of the soul food Southern cuisine, man. I'm sure some people look at that and be like, "What in the world?" But yeah, I guess it depends on region. But I mean, yeah, there's some things. I guess even just culture. I can't see myself eating no bat
yeah.
either. So
So yeah,
it's a bit much for me.
yeah. My other stories are taking us more toward politics. So I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, so some on a more lighthearted end, I have. So we all know Kanye West has been in the news a bunch of times for a lot of silly things and ridiculous things he's been doing. And one of the latest things, headlines that he had that came out a few days ago, was that Danny McBride. I'm not sure, if you guys Google him, you'll he's a familiar face. He did one of his more famous shows was Eastbound and Down, where he played like this aging pitcher in the MLB, which is like a comedy that was on HBO. Anyway, he was on an interview and he was talking about an interaction he had with Kanye, and Kanye essentially hit him up or flew out to him and was asking Danny McBride if he can play. Now, Danny McBride is white. If he can play Kanye West in a biopic of Kanye.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh. So naturally everybody's like, yo, what the hell is wrong with this guy, man? Why is he out here like doing silly things like this? But it also kind of goes in line with a lot of things that he's been doing. Like people have talked about when he's referenced, famous rich people back in the day. It's always like Walt Disney's and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all these like white men, and him always trying to get into the white fashion world. And he seems to feel validated for some reason by being accepted in these white spaces more so than black spaces. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess it's not too far fetched that he would actually want a white man to portray him in a movie. But Daniel Bride was like, this is not happening. And I'm just like, what would he not even look like?
Mm.
Anyway, that's
Black
Kanye
man
for you, man.
lost.
Yeah, definitely lost. Definitely in the sunken place. That is for sure. And then another story that's been kind of making headlines that is definitely, oh Lord, newsworthy is a student in Texas. I think there's been two students now where it's coming out where their school said that they will not allow them to walk during their high school ceremony if they do not cut their dreadlocks. DeAndre Arnold, he's 18 years old and has been growing his dreadlocks since he was about 12 years old. And it made headlines because everybody's like, this is ridiculous. And I think they recently just made this school policy as well. I don't think it's something that's always been the case. Um, Within the past year or so, which doesn't make sense because usually when schools make policies, students who are already in the school are usually grandfathered into those policies, and then maybe the new students coming in will have to adhere to them. I know that's how it usually works in colleges, but anyway, so yeah, celebrities have been speaking out and saying, speaking out against and it sounds like I don't know if it was the principal or whoever's in charge, whoever's making these decisions, really is doubling down. And it's like, I don't care who's hitting me up, I'm not changing these policies. I won't be bullied into changing it. And I think this kid also they already had standards where like he couldn't have his hair below his ears. And so every morning his mom kind of like buns it up
Mm-hmm.
or wraps it up. So that he can adhere to that policy. And again, these things are just silly. You see, this is why folks like Cory Booker and others have been making this a federal issue, a national issue of like banning hair discrimination, particularly in the workplace, but also needs to start to trickle down and be more impactful in these school districts as well.
Yeah, I think it is ridiculous. These rules that target people from a certain background and their cultural practices, and I'm not surprised that the principal or, the school leaders are like, oh, I'm going to double down and I'm not going to do it. It sucks for the kid because if it was my child, I know I would probably also tell him to stand strong. And that would mean that I guess he would miss his ceremony. But cutting your hair is a big decision, especially depending on like why he's growing his locks.
It's a huge decision. And I mean, literally, I'd be like, we still going to the graduation. And they're going to have to stop us, be calling the news, the media, they're going to be there to watch if anything goes down. But, we still going to walk across the stage and we're not playing this game with y'all. But yeah, it's a sad situation to be in, graduating just all because of your hairstyle, they're doing all this kind of stuff. But we need to do better. It's not that serious. And I want to know, like, the reasoning, like what is the rationale behind this like ban of like this particular hairstyle? Like you would really have to explain to me why you're choosing to do this. Part of your dress code policy doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And it can't be because of like professionalism. Like after this happened, I saw, a lot of people coming to support these students with their locks. Like I'm a professor, I'm a this, and I have these locks. I'm still perfect. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely not linked to that. To intellect, to potential, none of that. So it's just a hairstyle. I don't know why people treat that like they are. So kudos. We'll see what happens to that, and hopefully everything works out. And we still got a few months before graduation, so hopefully it all pans out where DeAndre will be able to walk across that stage with his dreadlocks.
I agree.
All right, so I guess we can, if you had a couple political stories before we get to some of the things I wanted to talk about, we can start with what you had and see where that will take it. Well, I guess before we get to the politics stuff, I guess I had another story really quickly that's kind of in between, not really old lords, but definitely something worth conversation, is the story with Terry Crews. Have you heard about that?
So yes, I have. His recent comments about America's Got Talent.
Yeah. So I'll play the clip in a second, but just a quick backstory is that Gabrielle Union, who was also a judge on America's Got Talent, had stepped down, and then there was apparently an investigation going on because she said there was a lot of kind of racism and sexism happening behind closed doors and a lack of diversity with that. So I'll play Terry Crews's clip, and then we can chime in and share our thoughts on that.
It hasn't been without controversy. While you guys, I guess we should ask you about the Gabrielle Union controversy. Of course, there are reports that her contract wasn't renewed because she reported a toxic atmosphere existed at the show. You're at the show. Is there a toxic atmosphere?
First of all, I can't speak for sexism because I'm not a woman, but I can't speak on behalf of any racism comments. That was never my experience on America's Got Talent. In fact, it was the most diverse place I have ever been in my 20 years of entertainment. The top 10 acts were Asian, women, older, younger, black, white. It was everything in the gamut. Now, I have to say this too. When you look at what the allegations are about, it was given by an unnamed source. My thing is, it's funny because I believe you should listen to women. You should always believe women. So I asked my wife what I should do. And she was like, first of all, if it's coming from an unnamed source, because Gabrielle Union has not made any statement to this day about any of these allegations publicly. Yeah. So
have you spoken to her?
I have not. I have reached out, but I have not heard anything. And so my thing was, my wife said, well, if she hasn't made a statement, why would you? Yeah. And I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to her.
That's right. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. We should mention that NBC is still investigating and that they have said that they will put new practices into place if necessary.
Yeah, okay. So so there was a lot of kind of back and forth, and everybody has been taking shots at Terry Crews, but people have even raised when we know when Terry Crews' situation happened of him being sexually assaulted, and he made headlines with that. And it was interesting because people were pulling up old tweets of how Gabrielle Union was supporting him and standing with him and his allegations and what had transpired. And now people are like, Terry, like she stood with you when you said this had happened. She didn't question you. She didn't say, oh, this, that, and the third. And now when it's reversed, here you go kind of throwing her under the bus and acting like what she's saying has no credibility as whatsoever.
Yeah, you know what? That was going to be one of my comments, that Gabrielle Union, like a lot of people, when he put out his story about, sexual assault and sexual harassment, supported him like a lot of people did. And so the fact that he wouldn't even, he's like, oh, I can't even speak on like sexism. And like, you can. You've been in this conversation. You've been in conversations about how gender, shapes dynamics. And I don't know. I think that if you were going to I think he should have just kept his mouth shut if he was going to say that. He should have kept with the wife comment. Like my wife was like, if Gabrielle Union hasn't said anything, why have you? So I won't be commenting on that. I would have just kept it as that, because even if you are a Black person, you still can't speak on somebody else's experiences of racism. You get what I'm saying? He's like, oh, I can't speak on that because I'm, not a man, but I am a Black person. Like, he's the authority on whether any type of discrimination or racism could have happened. Like, no, that's also not how it happened, not how it works.
I mean, he just, that's funny how he did frame that. Like, I can't speak about sexism, but I can certainly speak about racism, and I do not see that. And, what I think is crazy too is, intersectionality, right? Because I even think about my experience at Purdue, and you were there, and there's a lot of other Black women who kind of came and went in and out of the program, and just from the experiences of the Black women, I didn't have a lot of the same experiences, right? But it didn't mean I could, discredit. Like, a lot of the stuff had to do with sexism and racism combined, because the white women weren't experiencing some of the same things that the Black women were experiencing in the program, and so it's like, so that would be me like going through my experience at Purdue and be like, well, nah, they're wrong. Like, I don't see this racism, or I don't see it because I don't experience it. But I think, gender played a role in that too. And I could see it happening the same way with Gabrielle Union, where she, because she's a woman, because she's a Black woman, is experiencing some things that Terry Crews, being a big Black man, wouldn't experience in the same fashion, right? They're probably going to be a little more hesitant to approach him in a certain way. But also, he seems to be a little more complacent with certain things when it comes to this racism stuff anyway.
Well, what I'm about to say that intersectionality is the word. And I don't know. It's just kind of disappointing because I've always liked Terry Crews. So this is really disappointing because I just think if you're going to try to be the authority and really contradict what somebody says, probably because you still want your job, just don't say anything, because you're going to come out looking real funny.
Yep. All he had to say was no comment, protect your Black sisters, man. Like, it's just like, even if you're not sure if you agree with it, I would just be like, yo, I'm not. You have to talk to, Gabrielle about that.
Like, I don't want to speak for her, but I support her. Yes. Like, there's a lot of PC ways to do that if you don't want to say something, but.
And still keep your job, yep. But he just went all the way out on the limb. It's the most diverse place I've ever worked. Like, come on, Terry, man.
And Gabrielle Union responded like, diversity where? Like, behind the scene, where is all this diversity?
Yeah, it sounded like he was actually talking about the talent. Like the people on stage. And of course, that's going to be diverse for ratings and stuff like that. But I think Gabrielle wasn't talking about the diversity on stage. She was talking about that diversity behind stage and what was going on behind the scenes. So, I thought that was definitely a story worth mentioning for sure. All right. So I guess we can go into any other stories that you had, and then see where
it's leading into
us.
Politics, and I know exactly it'll lead to where you're going. So got two.
Okay.
So first of all, have you heard about these recordings that have Donald Trump's voice on them, talking about firing the U.S. ambassador, which is, what this whole impeachment thing is about? Or part?
No, I actually missed that.
So the guy Lev Parnas or something like that, who Donald Trump said he doesn't even know. He's like, yeah, I take a picture with a lot of people. I don't know him, blah, blah, blah. But during the April 2018 dinner where this Lev guy was there, I guess he recorded a lot of his interactions because now he says he has even more tapes. But in the conversation, Trump says, get rid of her. Get her out tomorrow. I don't care. Get her out. Take her out. Okay? Do it. And, you know, other things. Even in one recording, it was like, I'm happy that Clinton didn't choose what's his name, Bernie, as a VP because he's a big trade guy. He's the only guy I didn't want her to choose. And the guy says he has more recordings. I think it all has to be authenticated, but you claim you didn't know this Lev guy, but he got you on tape saying all types of stuff.
Yeah, that's. I wish we had more of that of Trump on tape because he just be blatantly be lying, man. And yeah, you kind of need this hardcore evidence to prove that what he says is usually just, you know, a bunch of lies. He runs his presidency like he's a businessman. I mean, it makes
like
sense.
A mobster, but take her out. Like,
yeah, like you take her out, like fire, get her out of here. Like, what is this, man? You are the president. You just can't fire people because they disagree with you or they, you know, have opinions on directions of where things should happen. This is like, you know, people say like, you know, being like a dictator, you know, very, very similar in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I'm glad that at least the truth is coming to light now.
Okay, so for this second one, and this it kind of is bothering me. So the National Emerson College conducted a poll this past week of 1,128 registered voters. And they asked, would you, if your candidate doesn't win, will you support the eventual nominee for the Democratic Party? Yes. So, you know, for the vast majority, you know, it was like upwards of like 80 or 90% said that if their candidate didn't win, they would support the eventual nominee. So, 90% of Warren's people said that. I think probably 87% of Biden's people said they would. But only 53% of Sanders supporters said they would support the eventual Democratic nominee if he wasn't the candidate. And that's troubling to me. 31% said it would depend on who it is. And yeah, another 16% was just like, no, period.
See, this is the worrisome thing. You know, most it seems that people who are voting for other candidates are very reasonable. And like, you know, 90% above are like, yeah, I'm gonna vote for kind of whoever comes out. But there's some with these Bernie supporters, man, that really worry me because, you know, sometimes they just are very similar to these Trump supporters. You know, it's in a lot of ways. And actually, I've seen something that was talking about how in some cases, people that if they don't get Bernie would actually say they would rather just vote for Trump as well, which seems just weird to me. I just don't get like what's going on here with this rationale, but it's like they're all about Bernie, not really about progress and getting Trump out of there, which I think should be most voters' priority at this moment. And so, yeah, I think, like you said in the beginning, that's worrisome in a lot of ways.
I've been trying to figure it out. Is it like because they're both anti-establishment? Is it, and like thinking about Trump's comment, like the trade thing, like I don't know, but listening to because I like to listen and see where people are coming from. So reading a lot of insight from very strong Bernie supporters, it seems that some of them are more so independent. They don't have any loyalty to the Democratic Party. So it's like, I am a Sanders person and I'm voting in the Democratic primary so that I can vote for Bernie, but I'm not actually a Democrat.
I can see that. I can see that, but still, just what's at stake, you know? I don't know if it's worth that, potentially losing to Trump again, because of you're being hard set on these party lines for Bernie. And I think Bernie, if Bernie winds up not getting the nod, you know, we still have to see. I think he has to be very purposeful in making sure that his supporters still support and vote, and really kind of maybe go above and beyond to do that for whoever gets the nomination, because it's just very important. It's too much at stake.
To be honest, I think his movement has taken on a life of its own, and I don't think his coaching or his, you know, saying like, "Hey, let's do that." I don't think it will work. I feel like it's kind of like if Trump were to tell his supporters, and I'm not saying that Trump supporters and Sanders supporters have the same beliefs. I'm saying that they have the same kind of obsession with their party leader or their like respective leader, in a sense that like it's that person or nobody, and they'd be willing to like really go to bat for them in ways that most people aren't connected to a political person. Because I know I show it. I'm like, none of these people are that important to me, like from like a personal perspective. So it's just kind of like that, I don't know, emotion behind supporting them. It is the same. And so the same way that I don't think Trump could probably control his supporters now, I don't think Bernie could either.
No, I agree. I can see that. It won't be as easy to do that. I guess just to be determined. I guess we'll just keep our eye on this, because I just don't want this 2016 to happen all over again.
Oh, I see it coming. I'm just going to be, I see it, because I don't know what's going to happen with these primaries. I really don't. And I don't like the whole either is my way or the highway. I don't like that either. So in some ways, it turns me off from supporting. I'll be honest, because I don't actually have anything too strongly against. Like, I mean, he all right. Hell, I feel the same way about him that I do all the other ones. Like, okay, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't feel strongly, but the whole my way or the highway, I'm not going to vote for anybody else. I'm going to burn the country down because I didn't get my way. It makes me not want to even lend any support to that at all. So it is actually a turnoff. Yeah. I feel like people are like those people, the bus people, not saying all Bernie people are, but the Bernie or bus people really turn me off from like any type of support at all. Because like I said, it makes me feel like, okay, this is a person that will not be held accountable by his supporters. He'll be able to get away with the same things that Trump is able to get away with because everybody is just like so enamored with him. And I'm not comfortable with any politician being that loved. I'm sorry.
All right, good. So we got, I guess we will talk some more about Bernie because we got him being loved and him not being not so loved. Right, so some famous people. So I guess we'll start with, again, since we're talking about Bernie supporters, we'll start with somebody who recently came out and kind of gave, I guess, an endorsement of Bernie and said that he would vote for Bernie more likely than not if Bernie got the nod as far as who the Democratic candidates are. And this person is Joe Rogan. If you're not familiar with Joe Rogan, he has probably one of the biggest podcasts out there. And, you know, he's a former comedian, actor, is big in like MMA commentary and stuff like that. Has all kinds of guests on his podcast. pretty much anyone from all kinds of walks of life, political views, stances, colors, race, whatever. And so, it's a very popular podcast. And on his podcast, I'll play the clip and then we can go from there.
Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and I believe in him. I like him. I like him a lot. What Bernie stands for is a guy who, well, look, you could dig up dirt on every single human being that's ever existed if you catch them in their worst moment and you magnify those moments and you cut out everything else and you only display those worst moments. That said, you can't find very many with Bernie. He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that in and of itself is a very powerful structure to operate from.
All right. So after that kind of endorsement, because I think, he has millions of viewers. And so that's a, decent sized endorsement where he can sway a lot of people, a lot of his listeners to vote for Bernie as well. Shortly after that, on Bernie's social media, they reposted that clip of Joe Rogan's endorsement and, kind of endorsing the endorsement and shedding light on it and embracing that endorsement. And then there was a lot of backlash after that. And a lot of the backlash stems from Joe Rogan's past on seemingly, I think he said the N-word before, or once or twice, I believe. And then also mainly issues stemming from his comments dealing with the LGBTQIA community and the transgender community. There are clips going around about him talking about transgender athlete, a trans woman who was an athlete, I think an MMA fighter, and kind of his distaste, racist comments, trans comments, and people are saying, what does this mean for the Bernie campaign to reinforce or embrace a support from Joe Rogan in a lot of ways. Some people are saying this can hurt him, this can help him, because Joe Rogan seems, a lot of people, the vibes are that he has a good chunk of conservative listeners, right? People that might be more likely to be Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. And so he can potentially help sway the people on the other side, or maybe in the middle, to Bernie, which can be helpful. But then other folks are saying he may lose some votes because of what Joe Rogan stands for. And now people in certain communities, maybe Black community, maybe in the LGBTQ community, may be less likely to support Bernie because of that as well. So I guess it's to be determined.
Yeah. So for me, this is how I feel about it. You can't help who endorse you. People have all types of supporters, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if it is somebody that has, said things that, are not right and not great, I don't know if that's the endorsement that you celebrate. It kind of reminds me of, you remember Obama and the Jeremiah Wright situation, which I can't even remember what Jeremiah Wright said.
Mm-hmm. I think it had to do something about sexuality. I think it was something along those lines.
Yeah. But I remember Obama having to distance himself from this person he actually knew. It was his pastor, but it was kind of like I cannot align myself with certain mindsets or ideologies. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't know, consistency. And I thought it was also interesting that, I don't know if Bernie put this out or if it was his surrogates, but just like, we have to build an umbrella. The politics includes people, from all walks of life. And, essentially we all have to welcome them. But I'm like, but you won't do that for your fellow Democratic brother or sister if they're a little bit more right than you are, but you'll accept the extreme people that have sexist, racist, transphobic, or have said those things. So it's just, that's interesting to me that, for instance, you can't accept somebody that's on the same side than you, that might be a little bit more right, but you can accept like a more extreme right person. That doesn't make sense to me, but I don't know. It might make sense to other people.
Not sure either. And I mean, and Rogan also endorsed Tulsi Gabbard as well, which threw us a big red flags for me before he talked about Sanders during when Tulsi was still in the runnings. I mean, she probably technically still is, but he threw his support. He said, he would vote for her as well and support her. And, we've all had our questions and reservations about where her loyalties really lie because she do a lot of suspect stuff. And so that's also interesting that he would support her too. So, it's like Tulsi and Bernie, it's an interesting combination in but I mean, he said because he's been consistent, which is he's saying Bernie has been one of the most consistent. And, I want to talk about that in a little bit too, and tie in with this other story about to talk about when it comes to Bernie.
Yeah. What else you got?
All right. So we talked about who liked a big name that liked Bernie. Now, of course, we're going to talk about a big name who seems to not like Bernie as much, which is pretty interesting. And that name is Hillary Clinton. I'm going to play this clip too, so you guys get the full context, and then I'm going to share my thoughts on the issue.
We turn now to that new documentary, Hillary Clinton Unplugged and Unleashing, tonight on so many topics, including her former rival, Senator Bernie Sanders, saying, quote, nobody likes him, nobody wants to work with him, and refusing to say whether she'll endorse him if he's the 2020 nominee. Here's ABC's Eva Pilgrim.
Tonight, Hillary Clinton unplugged and unleashing. In a new documentary, she opens up about it all, including Bernie Sanders. A quote from the film in a Hollywood Reporter article, Clinton saying he was in Congress for years. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. Clinton and the filmmaker both spoke to the magazine about the new documentary, exploring it all. The reporter asking if Clinton stands by what she said about Sanders. She said yes. Sanders off the campaign trail for the impeachment trial, responding today.
On a good day, my wife likes me, so let's clear the air on that one. Secretary Clinton is entitled to, her point of view. My job today is to focus on the impeachment trial.
Why do you think the secretary is still talking about 2016?
That is a good question. Ask him.
Clinton's comments come just a week after Sanders faced off with Elizabeth Warren over her claim Sanders told her a woman could not win in 2020.
All right, Dad. So how you feel about Hillary coming in with the spice? She's like, nobody likes this dude. He can't get nothing done. I mean, and that's extreme, right? I mean, that's kind of like, it's not just like you feel some type of way about his policies. It's just like, this guy he's a clown, if you will.
So Clinton has clearly reached a place where she's just like, I don't give a damn anymore. Which she's not an official part of, she has no official role. She's a private citizen now. So, of course, she's entitled to, her own opinions and stuff like that. It is like I feel like because these comments are coming out now, we see the poll with who, would you vote for, this person if your person didn't win? And I feel like the comment just reflect the fact that, like, we are still more divided than ever, and it's just going to continue to lead that way. And I think it's going to land to a Trump victory, to be honest. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, I think if Trump won this time around, it will definitely be less, surprising and less shocking. And so, because I think most people are kind of still, the way these Democratic primaries are setting up, we're kind of preparing ourselves for that. So it seems like that separation. People were like, Hillary ain't have all that smoke when Bernie endorsed her after she won. I'm like, come on now, that's politics.
Yeah.
They were the two biggest people, and to try to unify the party, why would Hillary be like, nah, I'm not effing with him? And so I don't know why even people were really like throwing that out there. But it's interesting to see kind of like this insight, right? Because it's kind of like, Bernie is widely loved, and I'm sure he is a good person and has a lot of support. But I think there are it seems like sometimes his record or his history goes gets overlooked, right? It's like a lot of the, I guess, bruises or bad decisions of other politicians get thrown out there, and then Bernie kind of gets, he don't have much said. And so this kind of raised my antennas a little bit when I heard Hillary say this, and I'm like, is there truth to this? Do people really like him? Does he get things done? And I think the results will surprise a lot of folks. Because I started to look, so I went kind of down this rabbit hole. I was looking at a bunch of articles, and I really wanted to see. I think the key word for me was effectiveness, and that's something we've talked about time and time again on this podcast about the politics. Is who's going to get something done, right? Because you and I have both been skeptical, not just about Bernie, but just people who have these really grandiose ideas, and like, is this actually going to happen when you get into office? And I think Hillary's comments kind of sparked my interest in saying, well, this is easy to see. Let's look at people's past to see what they have already done, right? To see who has been effective in their positions already in Congress and Senate and all that kind of stuff. And so I was looking at, the people who have been this year's Democratic nominees and candidates, and seeing what have they done in these past few years. And I'm just going, before I get to some of the results, I want to see, who do you think out of the candidates, that we know of, has had the most bills enacted in Congress during their tenure?
Hell, probably not Klobuchar.
Klobuchar. Outside of Biden has the number one, and then right behind Biden is Klobuchar.
I have a feeling because the way she be talking, like, I get shit done. That's how she be talking.
She says that all the time, and it is 100% factual. Lifetime passing of bills. What you call it? I think Biden has like 42 passed, and Klobuchar has 32. Which is, and no one is really near either the two of them. I think let me see if I can find it. Where's that chart I had up? Where is it? But anyway, so Klobuchar has had the most behind Biden, and Biden, clearly has had a longer tenure in office than Klobuchar, and Sanders has had about 7 bills passed. He's had some of the fewest since he's been his 28-year-long tenure in office. 27 bills passed while he's been in there, which is interesting when you say
27
that.
or 7?
Seven out of his 28 years in office. And half of those, I think about 2 to 3, are kind of like, what I noticed when I'm looking at this, and all of you can look at it, if you go to govtrack.us, it lets you know, you can literally just type in the name of each senator or congressperson, and they'll give you the list of everything that all the bills that they've sponsored. And most of them have, it's kind of like when you think about, it's funny when you think about like tenure, right? And how when you got to do publication, they say, okay, we'll do a couple book reviews or a book chapter, like, kind of lighthearted stuff. It seems like within Congress and passing bills, a lot of them have bills that were passed that were literally just changing the name of post offices. And so out of the 7, Bernie has 2 that are that, and 1 that was creating a day, designating March 4th as Vermont Bicentennial Day. So out of the 7, only 4 are like actually kind of legislative stuff. And all of those have to deal with veteran affairs. Like compensating cost of living for veterans and stuff like that. And things dealing with, one thing with public water. So nothing really super significant. And what to me was more standout worthy was there was nothing there dealing with the stuff that he talks about with like class-based stuff. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff about preaching class and Medicare and healthcare and all that stuff. And there's nothing there in his 28 years of getting anything passed that's significant along those lines in his own state of Vermont. And I find that, I don't know, I just took issue with that. That doesn't sit too well with me about getting things done, right? So you're talking about Hillary's comment of, do people like him? I'll even take it a step further, right? When you're looking at what's going on in Congress and kind of looking at, I found this chart looking at co-sponsored bills between January 2017 and January 2019. So that really shows, who works well with other people. And the person who has the most co-sponsored bills is Elizabeth Warren with 646 in that 2-year span within the 115th Congress. The person who had the least co-sponsored bills, Bernie Sanders with 316. Again, even looking at things of time missed in Congress, between like missed votes of being in Congress, lifetime missed votes between 2007 and 2019 when they started tracking this, Bernie Sanders has the most missed votes out of the 2020 candidates with 6.4%, while people who like Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Klobuchar, Gillibrand have less than 1% missed votes. That means they're there a lot of the time getting stuff done. So I'm like, this is interesting when you look at the history of what's going on, who's actually passing things, getting things done in office, who's present, who's passing significant bills. It doesn't sit well for Bernie when we're looking at these facts of what's going on. So what are your thoughts, Steph?
I've heard that before, in the sense that, he's been in office for a very long time, but, it was something I always wondered, like, there are a lot of big plans, and why haven't they been put forward before? Just kind of wondering that, knowing that, people can sponsor and, co-sponsor bills and stuff like that. So to actually hear the numbers, because it's not something I researched myself, to be honest, but it is something that I had heard. To hear it flat out, I really would want to hear an explanation in relation to because a lot of people like him for his consistency. Yes, he's consistent in terms of the ideas he has put out over the last 50, 60 years. I would want to hear people talk about his track record a little bit and how that lends itself to the idea that he would actually be able to accomplish some of the big things that he could say, that he says that he wants to do. Because like I said, I don't want nobody selling me a border wall. And I say that symbolically to say, don't sell me a bunch of big dreams that you're not going to be able to enact, that you ain't even going to try to enact, but it sounds good and it's going to get the people going. So that's, what's in his track record that really makes you believe, beyond saying he's consistently, said the same thing, because I'm an actions speak louder than words kind of girl in my love life and my political life and all of it. So, my political love language is action. So
yeah, I mean, and it should be for most people. Some people were comparing Barack's lack of, didn't have a lot of bills enacted, but he had a very short tenure. Somebody like Bernie, who has 28 years and longer, you would expect to see more than 7 bills. I'm just going to be honest. It's just, what have you been doing, man? I mean, and the fact that you're getting reelected. So I think he's very good at messaging, very good at inspiring. But I think just looking at the numbers, people who have been the most active and effective gender stands out extremely to me. When you see Klobuchar, you see Warren, and who am I missing? Gillibrand, because she was early in the game. But those three have, looking at all the charts and the data, have been the most effective and active of really pushing for things. And then Booker is right behind them as well, in his tenure. So it's interesting to see the folks who made it, who didn't make it. Biden, he's been very effective too, and I think he's been very good with a lot of bipartisan, similar to Klobuchar. So it seems like the people who are getting most done seem to know how to negotiate and compromise with the other side. As well. What I find interesting about Klobuchar's bills, when I look at them, a lot of them, some of the things with water infrastructure, I think she's talked about that in debates, but a lot of the stuff we talk about when it comes to gender and women, she's put in an act to combat human trafficking, put in an act to promoting women in entrepreneurial activities. You're talking about environmental, wildlife restoration, Again, another trafficking act. She's been pretty looking at children and adoptees. So a lot of those kind of like items that we care about, she's actually been grinding out and getting things passed in during the period, 32 acts that are things that we want to see along those lines. And so I don't know, that surprised me. I'm not gonna lie, Daph.
I was about to say, now that you just said that, because I know, you know how we take those little quizzes, like, oh, who do you agree with and stuff like that. I think it might be, I might, of the people left, like go through their records to see what they've passed, what they've co-sponsored, what they've sponsored, to see, do they care about the same things I care about?
Mm-hmm.
And that could also narrow down like who I choose, like are people passing what I care about? And that gives a good indication of one, whether we share the same values, but two, could they get it done? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't thought about that approach. So we talked about last time, like, ways to, potentially choose a candidate or narrow it down. This is another strategy, like see what they're actually doing.
Mm-hmm. See what they're actually doing. And so, I think the only sad thing that I see when I'm looking at a lot of these candidates stuff is that not much stuff dealing with race, if you will, with most of them, any of them, which I think is interesting in a lot of ways. Booker has been active, but we talked about his, the Criminal Justice Reform Act that probably got a decent amount of race overlap, but not many of the other folks seem to. I mean, even though passing a lot of good stuff, race doesn't seem to be a major thing. And so this has me thinking, because everybody's been talking about Iowa and how Sanders has also kind of taken the top spot in the Iowa polls. And I'm starting to find, and we talked about this before, how Sanders don't really speak to Black folk. Mm-hmm. And I also started to think about why is that, and how can he? And I'm like, okay, he is a senator in Vermont. When I looked at the demographics of Vermont is 95% white. Mm-hmm. And so he is used to speaking and living in only white spaces and speaking to only a white demographic. And so it doesn't surprise me when he's taking the lead and not talking about races, but in places like Iowa, it doesn't surprise me, right? I think, and then the fact that he really doesn't have race as a major, he always just puts it in and folds it in with economic issues. When I start to look at, again, looking at the background of a lot of these folks and what the states that they are in charge of, if you will, Sanders, the bottom line is that it's a white, he cares about white issues and class primarily with white issues. And I think that's important because he does get a lot of times thrown in when we talk about the civil rights era and stuff like that. Good, great. But what has he done in this past 30 years? Mm-hmm. It's just been not as active as we would like to see in somebody who's been in office for 30 years and really I'm really worried about the white spaces. So I think that's important, especially for people of color, when we're looking at somebody like Bernie Sanders and who he speaks to, and why Buttigieg is also second in the polls in Iowa right now. Again, Indiana, white spaces, white people, they speak that language. But America is much larger than that. And maybe this is why people see they can compete with somebody like Trump, because they can speak that white rural language in a lot of ways. But I think that's something that we should have our antennas raised up on a little bit as Black folk when we're talking about these candidates.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I just feel like there's no candidate for us.
Sad truth, right? Sad truth. When we talk about Black folks and Black issues. So I think this is going to be one of those elections where we're going to definitely vote for really whoever gets to get Trump out of office is probably the primary reason. And we talked about that last week, which is one of the number one reason why I think Black folks are voting for whoever, somebody like Biden, et cetera, because they feel like he can beat Trump the most. And it's sad that that's what we kind of have to live with at this moment. We're not voting for somebody that really seems to have our interests at heart as a primary concern. Well, the paradox of being a Black American, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yep. All right. Anything else along those lines of Sanders and the voting and politics?
No, I think that's all I had for
Okay.
today. Yeah.
I guess the one last story I had is, which is worth mentioning, is the Supreme Court allowing the Flint residents to do lawsuits or
Oh,
sue
yeah, yeah.
the city of Flint and Flint officials for their lead water crisis going on there, still going on. So I think that is huge. They do need to be held accountable, and these folks do need to be compensated for the health. The health crisis that they have been put in because of the mishandling of what's going on with their water. Big.
Yeah, that is pretty big. More power to them. I hope that it works out in their favor because that whole situation was just so negligent and yeah, there was just such a lack of regard for human life. So I hope that works out.
All right, so then I guess we can close talking about we had some inquiry by a listener that was talking about what we had talked about, I think, during our Lonnie Love episode. Remember, and kind of wanted to revisit some of the comments or perspectives that we had, maybe clarify on some things. And I was like, yeah, for sure. And so, I'll read what was said. I won't give the name, but I'll read kind of what was said, and then we can talk about it. So what the listener said is curious how you two feel about how young Black boys who are into books, school, growing up, and are made fun of for being white by other Black children, and then grow up and aren't included in certain social groups and cultural groups. How do those people grow into their own as adults? I'll stop there and then we can talk about the other one after that. But I think this might stem from when I think you had mentioned, I think you were like giving a quick note to Black women, right? Like,
yeah,
like don't overlook certain kind of guys, right?
Yeah.
When you're stuff like that. And I think this is kind of where this line of questioning is coming from.
See, so it's hard for me to tell that person what they should do because, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it is the other people that should be more accepting of, I think, because I think sometimes like, and I don't know if this, if this person is introverted or not, but I can say sometimes introverted Black people just have a difficult time. I know I used to be that person, like in elementary school, I was that book person, but then in middle school, I was like, I'm going to be popular. And I, kind of forced myself into that. But for those who don't want to change who they are to try to fit in, which I think is really admirable, it's a really tough situation. Because I just think there should be more space for different types of Black people. And I think that also is related to environment. So like, for that comment, I talked with John about that a little bit. And he said that was kind of his experience as well. In high school, he was the, person that gets on the school bus and he's reading books and stuff like that. But then when he went off to college, he was like, it was so different because everybody at college was like that. And he joined a fraternity. And so he was able to kind of find that space within the Black community. But I just feel like there should be more room instead of like people changing who they are. Because sometimes I question like, should I have fought to be in a popular crowd or should I just have been the nerdy Daphne that sits up in the house reading books all day? And I feel like that was a challenge I actually had in graduate school when I was at Purdue because I was fighting back of like, I just like to be in the house just reading random stuff and it didn't always like, fit. So I don't know. That's difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. I think a part of it just, I think, the latter part of the question is asking, how do these people grow into their own as adults? Because I think as a child, it's difficult. I think, the concerns of children are a little different, right? Sometimes you just want to be popular. And we're not really, if reading a book's not cool and, people are joking on us or ridiculing us because we're reading books, it's like, what can I do to make y'all not do this or so I can fit in? Because that's important. I think it kind of just has to maybe start at a younger age. I think you're right. It's not about the person changing. It's about creating a culture where people understand, like, especially not fitting in, like, oh, you're not black for doing these things, right? Sometimes in the racial identity, it's just getting kids at a younger age to see different images of blackness, I guess. To say, like, this is blackness, right? Like, reading is being black, and writing, or, being good with computers, or whatever, things that might not be culturally popular within the black community. I think needs to be more in the forefront, or at least on equal playing field, is like, no, this is cool. Like, look at all these people who read and do these kind of things, and also popping and cool and fun. And then it'll be different. It won't be much of an adjustment when you're going to be an adult, because you're already like, oh, I already have that kind of confidence. But I can see when people are being excluded or ostracized because of a certain way, and then they get older, maybe hold on to some resentment, or trying to figure out how to fit in of blackness, and maybe try to get far away from black people because they feel like they didn't accept me for doing these kind of things. So, I don't think there's an easy answer to it. I think it was a really good question. But I think when it comes to, growing to your own as adults, you're right. It does depend on environment too, and spaces. If you have the luxury of going to college, then you can find folks like yourself and certain groups that you can fit in and feel at home. And sometimes if you're not in college, it might be a little harder to do. But yeah, good question. Then the second half of the question, also about interracial couples who focus on cultural identity, because in that episode we kind of talked about our viewpoints on kind of interracial couples, the children, offspring, and generational wealth within the black community. And if, how do we feel about that kind of getting passed down, and just our opinions on that. And so he said, especially those who encourage their children to appreciate and embrace their black heritage. I'm assuming he's meaning by, mixed race children from these interracial relationships. So do you feel that still takes away from the black community or from the black lineage for future gains of generational wealth and benefits? Curious to hear more about this as a proud black man who's about to marry a white woman in the next few weeks. And he said that they've talked a lot about culture, race, social issues, and how they want to raise their future kids. So how you feel about that, Daph?
So in terms of like lineage or, heritage and stuff like that, I feel like, I know for my comments, it was less about that, because I am of the opinion, I've said again and again, when it comes to mixed race people, I want to respect the identity that they are putting forward. So if it is somebody that is, really embracing their, black identity or something like that, that's all good. Cause we have like the Jesse Williams, we have a lot of people that do that. And, that's all good. I feel like my stuff was more about, wealth. And I just feel like, so when you talk about generational wealth, after the kids, there'll be another generation. And it'll depend on what they do. And I think that, that's my biggest thing. Like, but it also, I guess, depends on what you do with, like, so for instance, if I, never got married and had kids, I would probably be trying to build up the lives of my nieces and nephews. And so I don't have a straightforward answer when it comes to like lineage and like culture and stuff like that. I think that's different, and I'm not making an argument about like, whether you can cultivate like a strong ethnic and racial identity in your mixed race children. Less about that. And with that, I feel like it's more about what they choose. In terms of the wealth, I think it just depends on what the other generations do after that. So I don't know if it's Sidney Poitier or somebody, but I think it's one like older black actor that I think pretty much all of his kids and grandkids have now gone on to like marry outside of their race. And so he's like the only black person left, almost. And so, you get what I'm saying? So like what he did build, hopefully they will continue to celebrate that and try to push that forward. But in a society where whiteness is valued, I can just say I don't know whether they'll do that.
Yeah. I can see that. Going back to it, I think I clarify some things. I think, when we made those comments and when I made those comments, I didn't want, I understand that people are, it wasn't any way, shape, or form trying to talk bad about interracial relationships or say that there's something wrong with interracial relationships, right? It's just what my perspective was just coming in, just saying that historically with Black folks, and now that we are coming into our own with ownership and wealth and thriving a bit more economically than past generations, right? I was just saying, generally speaking, I don't want Black folks just going out there and just getting with white folks now, right? Because I feel like white folks will be also more likely to find us as more suitable partners because we are better economically, right? And I think I just want my premise was to be conscious of that, right? Not that there's anything wrong if you do happen to get with somebody of a different race, but I think that, generally speaking, I think I would just like to see Black folks keep that in mind. Now, what I like about the comments from our listener is that I completely am okay and feel fine with like if you are in an interracial relationship, and again, we said this last time, like it had nothing to do with the kids, right? The kids are going to identify with however they identify. But I would like to see that folks who are in interracial relationships that are Black do exactly what he's doing, right? Is making sure that your kids are comfortable, understand your Black heritage, understand their Black identity, comfortable around Black folks, and embrace their Blackness, right? I think that's very important to me, because then it's not like when it comes to generational wealth, and if that is important to you as a Black person and you're going to produce these Black offspring, then they are understanding of like what this means in the Black culture, of the wealth you are building for them and how that impacts their people and their community. I think I would have a big issue with folks who may be in interracial relationships and then kind of leave that part out to their half Black children, right? Not having them fully understand like what this means and this side of their racial identity comes from and the history behind it. So that way, hey, whatever decisions you decide to make later on as an adult, from a child and becoming an adult, you're at least in the back of your mind know what the Black experiences are and what's important and what kind of needs to happen. And in that essence, you're still, contributing to the, I guess, future generations of Black culture or Black identity and race and stuff like that, right? It's not necessarily just being with a white person and all of a sudden that now, there's no passing along generational wealth to Black kids. Those kids are still Black. Like I personally view kids that are, mixed Black and white. I view them as kids of color. They are Black. How they identify is up to them. But the way I see them, like you're a Black person, because you're going to get treated. You're going to get treated as such, right? How they view themselves and how they want to do it. But if you got darker skin tone and a police officer stops you, they're treating you as a Black person. And so I think that's also important too. So it was a good question, because I just, it raised some interesting ideas, and I don't want folks who are listening to us, who are in those situations, to think that, we're, and I know they know this because they've been listening to us for a while, that we're not, but there might be new listeners, right?
Yeah.
So we're not, going against or feeling kind of way at all about interracial relationships. But, this is a podcast that I wanted to create really for the Black experience, right? And to get how I feel as a Black person, how Daphne feels as a Black person and a Black woman, to have a platform just to get it out there and say, right? And sometimes you may agree, sometimes you may not agree, but the intent is always never meant to harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just our perspectives from our lived experiences, from our intellect, or things like that. But we love all of you equally. We appreciate all of you equally. And we just, but I'm glad you reached out, because that's important. That's what we want more of from our listeners too.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is an example.
Yeah.
I
thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, and that's why when we did that, I was going out of my way to clarify that, like, love is love. But it was just, like I said, mine is more so about wealth, even than like the heritage and lineage and legacy and stuff like that. But when it comes to like couples from different backgrounds, like I can't speak interracially, but I can speak from like a multi-ethnic perspective because me and John don't share the same background. And it's tough. And it's something that we have to think about. I could, just like planning a wedding, how, those cultural differences come out and impact things. And, I can just imagine when you have kids because, I am very solid in my African American identity. And it is something I want my children to know that legacy and to identify, with the African American experience. And, the same, I also think it's important that, they can say that they have a place in Africa that they call home. There's, food and music and clothing related to John's identity that I also want them to be close to. And, when kids have multi-ethnic or multi-racial identity, there's a two-ness that they have to contend with because they're a part of two cultures. They're a part of two different things. So, I mean, it's not the same because, I can see the overlap in my experience in the sense that like when my kids grow up, they're very much going to be probably between two different worlds. And I know for like my nieces and nephews, John's, like his sister and brother-in-law, they're both Cameroonian. Those kids are going to have a different experience than my kids and maybe even feel more Cameroonian than my kids because they actually grow up in a Cameroonian household where both mom and dad, they speak the language, like they have a pidgin, they eat the food, you know what I'm saying? So I can imagine that my kids are, could be like, feel like, okay, where's my place? Am I blah, blah, blah. So I don't even think that's an experience that like interracial couples deal with, but it's an issue, I think, when two people from different backgrounds come together, period.
Yeah, no. I was like, your kids are gonna be like, have the best of both worlds when it comes to like blackness.
Yeah, which I think it's cool too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna be like, like Blade, like was half human, half vampire, and had all their strengths, none of their weaknesses. Mm-hmm. It's kind of similar you talk because a lot of times with at least the Black American experience, African Americans, etc., folks like us, like we do have that. The issue with us is like we have that disconnect from the motherland, right? And the fact that your children will have a direct connection to the motherland and also direct connection to what it's like being Black in America. They got like best of both worlds where they get the full experience. And although, your nieces and nephews may get the one side again, they're not, they're still going to have a kind of deficit with identity, if you will, right? Not fully understanding because of that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that's pretty cool when you talk about it, folks, they can really walk into almost any Black conversation when they get older.
Yeah.
I can talk from the African experience. I can talk from the Black American experience. So now what? Now y'all got to listen to what I got to say. So that's going to be cool and dope.
And you know what? So this is, not to drag this out, but it also thinking about, at least from like mixed race people that I have known and talked to, like there's a world that a non-mixed race Black person will never know because they aren't privy to it. To have actual white family members, their conversations, their experience, like that I will never understand as a Black person with two Black parents. And so it's just, it's kind of like and hell, that's probably a strength within itself. And like, if you really do cultivate that identity, then maybe they can be a catalyst for change in other communities.
Or be president of the United States.
Or be president of the United States. But be a part of conversations to where they're pushing in a way that a Black person who don't have these close ties to, and like, I have friends that are white, but like having family members that are white and you can push conversations at the dinner table, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? That's a completely different experience. And there are strengths there if you are willing to use that access to be changed. But, you know, there are some who are like, I don't want to be in that conversation. You know what I'm saying? That's who I am. So yeah, if you build enough little, you know, Jesse Williamsons who, you know, willing to have these conversations and push the envelope, then yeah, we need that too. Although, you know, I'm not saying that I think, you know, mixed race people will solve racism, but if, you know what I'm saying, they have access to certain spaces.
Yeah, no, there's
conversations.
Yeah, there's strengths for sure. You're right. Being able to navigate in white spaces, right, and communicate in white spaces, because I tell you, that's not a strength of mine. And so having folks that are not just able to do that, but raised in those environments, and like you said, introduced or living in a world that you and I are really not abreast to. That's, as they get older and learn, that it can be very valuable, right? A strong asset of like really understanding, you know, to hit that middle ground and get, if there is racial issues or whatever, at least figuring out ways to communicate effectively to both sides, right? Because you're familiar and very fluent on what's going on culturally on both sides. So yeah, for sure. No deficit strengths you can bring to. It's always a strength, right? When you're in love and you're creating new life and bringing two universes together, as they say.
Yeah.
But no, that was good. Good conversation today. Anything else, Dav?
Nope. Just this is actually our last episode like this.
Yep. Next week we'll be starting back on the interviews. So we'll tell you all about that next week. Bring back some interviews. This has been good. Hopefully y'all been enjoying Daphne and I for these past couple of months. It seems like I have. I've been looking at the numbers. You know, there was no major dip of listenership, so it seems y'all were cool checking this out. So we appreciate that, and then we'll definitely catch up with y'all next week. Next week we may try to stream next week. It's going to be like a test one, so it won't be publicizing it a lot, but if you do want to catch us, you could probably catch us. We usually stream around 10 a.m. on Sundays. So if you want to log into our either YouTube page or Facebook page, one of the two, we should be live streaming our beginning segments like we normally do with Oh Lord News and all that kind of stuff. So check us out, and then we know as we work out the kinks and figure out what we're doing and give us some feedback. And hopefully if it works the way I think it should, you guys should also be able to chat with us live. We'll not 100% sure if it's gonna work yet, but tune in and if you can, hit us up and chat with us live and let's test this all out together. But other than that, if you haven't yet, follow us on social media at BHD Podcast. We're Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to keep up with all our latest content. You can also email us, bhdpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any ideas, guests, topics, questions like we had today. We'd love to have a regular segment of questions if possible, but, submit them. And we love to take some time to answer those for you guys. And then after you do that, go ahead and review and rate us on iTunes. And then after you review and rate us, go ahead, share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your enemies. And as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.
If you're interested in continuing this and other conversations, visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to subscribe to our email list, suggest topics, and participate in our discussion forums.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at BHD Podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite platform. And as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.